Hey, good day, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of Pirkei Avos, the Ethics of the Fathers, live from Israel with Rabbi Chaim Coffman. I'm so grateful that he's going into depth and sharing with us these lessons as they've been handed down to him, and it's just such a joy to hear him continue. So today we're going to continue, though, with Chapter 2, Mishnah 9, Part 5. Let's jump right in and see how the rabbi's doing today. I'm still fighting off the tail end of COVID, but glad to be here myself. So, Rabbi Coffman, so good to be with you, sir. You're live on the air. We're going to turn it over to you. And, how's everything in Israel?
Always a pleasure. Just had a 2-day end of the festival, festival Thursday night going into Shabbos. So now I don't know, my house will be upside down, I'm sure, turning back to every day, getting rid of all the Passover stuff. And I'm sure there are long lines, people, waiting to get pita and to get, bread, freshly made bread and other things. Because, go for a whole week without eating this stuff, and it can be a little bit hard, right, on the digestive system. Some people definitely, matzah doesn't necessarily agree with them, but there are some people that eat it all year round. So, yesh v'yesh. There are those that like it, those that hate it, those anywhere in between. So, another holiday sort of come and gone, and now, whatever, we have to take all that emunah, all that belief, faith in God of all the makos, all the all the plagues, and the Jews coming out of Egypt, and we ourselves coming out of our own, difficult times, whatever it is. It's not just about the Jews coming out of Egypt, but again, the Jewish people, Jews in general, coming on whatever difficulties they themselves certainly have gone through, so to speak. So, again, every holiday has their spiritual influence. Obviously, we have to take that in, use it, sort of suck it up. We have to use it and, let it last for the year. Saw something interesting, just as a side point here, that according to Kabbalah, the spiritual uplift, we get from Passover, from the night of the Seder. So according to Kabbalah, we're judged on that. We're judged how well we give it over to our kids, how much we sing it, we live it, all that. Tremendous judgment, right? Tremendous judgment, for the whole year. So, Passover comes, it's a lot of work. You got to clean up and, make sure there's no chametz, no leavened product and anything. And, anywhere, wherever you might have eaten, it's a job, right? It's a job and a half, but sometimes we get caught up. We get caught up in all that. We forget what the real purpose is, all right? The real purpose is about emunah, right? It's about proper faith in God, the fact that God intervenes in history, the fact that God runs the world, that the God is in charge, right? There's no question. There's no question. So we have to take that in. We have to give that over to our kids. There's an obligation for the father. Give it over to his sons. An explicit verse in the Torah, right? Tell over the story to your son, to give it over to your son, and to pass that down, right? And how's the son going to give that over to his kids, right? He's going to know the story, right? But that's the obligation, passed down, generation, kind of like oral law. How do I know, right? People say, how do I know such a thing happened? Because our fathers told us the story, and their fathers, and their fathers. And there were 4 generations of the Passover Seder. There's a great-grandfather, grandfather, father, and the son. So imagine there's like an 85-year difference between the youngest son and the great-grandfather. And that great-grandfather saw his great-grandfather, right? So going back now 100 years, 150 years. So you need only 80 of those generations to go back to Mount Sinai. You can say, 3,000 years, 3,500 years. Sounds like so much time. But if I add 80 of those generations, that doesn't seem like so much, if you think about it. So, Passover, tremendous time. One event in history. Many, many things. Many, many things have to do with Passover. Many. that Jewish people do commemorate, etc. As we say, Zecher L'Tzias Mitzrayim, remembering that God took us out of Egypt. So we are still in chapter 2, Mishnah 9 is part 5. We'll see if we actually finish up Mishnah 9. And that is Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai received the tradition of Hillel and Shammai. Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, the youngest of the students of Hillel. And he used to say that if you study much Torah, don't take credit for yourself, because that's what you're created to do. Now, the reality is, we mentioned this in different ways, different contexts, but the reality is, why in the world am I think I'm so great? Learned a lot of Torah, may be true, but even if a person learned a lot of Torah, so what? That's what you're supposed to do. So how can I think, oh, I'm so great? Right? Might think you're so great. Look, I learned this, I learned that, I learned the other thing. Got all this knowledge, right? Hopefully we remember some of it also. But we have all this knowledge. And we mentioned before, Torah is as wide as the ocean, as long as the earth. So there's so much to learn, so much depth. Tremendous amount of depth. I remember when I changed learning from one place to another, it's totally a different way of learning, a different philosophical outlook. I asked somebody, I was like, what can be the real difference? What can be the real difference in Jewish outlook? Right? What? You're learning at a different level? So, kind of hard to put into words what that means. What does it mean you're learning at a different level? So you can say there are a lot of different levels. First level, trying to understand what the words mean. Then understanding what the context is. Then understanding the commentaries. Then making distinctions between commentaries. Different levels. A lot of different levels. One thing, though, when you look at Torah learning in general, compared to anything else, I mentioned this before, but I'll mention again, all good stories bear to be repeated. And that is, I learned for a year, day and night, learning how to learn. Now, learning how to learn is not easy, right? First, again, it's different language. So Hebrew I knew how to read, didn't understand, too much, but had to learn how to break down the words to see what the root of the word was, to see what it meant, and all that. And then from there, what do? You got to put it in context. Now, is it past tense? It's present tense? What does it say? What's this rabbi actually saying? Now, the question is, even if you understand the words, what's the context? So today, Art Scroll made it very easy. Made it very, very easy. You go through an Art Scroll Gemara, and a person will think, oh, I understand what's going on. I can just read the English. Okay, but learning Talmud, you need someone to teach you. It's not something a person can learn on their own. Right? Definitely not something a person can learn on their own. I've seen people try and quote certain things, and it's obvious they don't know how to learn. Right? So there are things that are off limits. Off limits to Jews also, if you're not going to learn it with someone else. In other words, someone once told me, yeah, they're learning, tractate brachot, they're learning with another person. Very good. But neither of them know how to learn, as far as I understand. One for sure doesn't know how to learn. Never went to yeshiva, doesn't know. The other person I can't speak for, but I'm going to assume the same thing. I'm going to assume he also doesn't know how to learn. Now, does that mean they won't necessarily get something out of it? They'll get something out of it, potentially. Because if you put in effort, you'll get something out of it. That's what the Talmud says. You'll get something out of it, but if you're learning it like a kov ba'alma, like a monkey, and you're repeating words, and you're saying them over, even in a language you understand, doesn't really matter, you're saying over what it means. Very good. You're saying what it means, so what? So let's say better. You're saying over the words. Does that in any way, shape, or form mean you understand what it means? No. Doesn't mean that. One of my rabbis told me that there were two priests, stopped him one day, wanted to learn Baba Kama. Right, all about laws of damages. So they started like quoting things verbatim. So my rabbi started asking them questions. Right? The rabbi started asking them questions, and they couldn't answer. Why couldn't they answer? Because they learned it like a monkey. When you learn it like a monkey, all you can do is repeat it. You're like a parrot. But that doesn't mean you have understanding. I've seen people quote things. They think they know what it means, but they obviously
being drone.
don't.
Yeah.
They obviously don't. So you need someone to be able to teach you. It's not something you can learn on your own. Right? I get this question a lot. Kabbalah. People want to learn Kabbalah. So I always say you can't study higher mathematics, i.e. calculus, without trigonometry or
algebra.
You can't run till you learn how to walk or crawl. Someone just asked me earlier, am I allowed to study? Can I buy the book Sefer Gilgulim? Sefer Gilgulim by the Arizal is a book on who is reincarnated of who in Jewish history. Right, and what's really going on behind the scenes. So one of my rabbis, very much steeped in Kabbalah, once told me, they said you need a lot of fear of heaven to read this book. Tremendous amount of fear of heaven. Now, someone coming out of left field, totally coming out of left field, say, I want to, can I learn this? No. That was my answer. A two-letter answer. No.
Well, what for?
I understand what for. It makes sense what for. Because when you understand who's fighting against who and what's going on and who's reincarnated of who, yeah, it makes it a little bit deeper what's going on. I get it. I definitely get it. But again, you can't run before you learn how to crawl. Right? Obviously, if you say that, wow, this is totally forbidden, that's what everyone wants to learn. You can say if you want to learn it, fine. You don't want to, okay, it's no big deal. But you tell people, no, it's totally forbidden. Why they want to learn it. That's exactly why they want to learn it. But if a person's not on the level, what's the point? There are people that give classes. They'll give classes to a lot of people. They'll give classes to a lot of people. And what'll happen? What'll happen is there are going to be very few people understand. There are going to be very few people going to understand the class. They're going to speak so high that only the cream of the crop is going to understand. So Coffman over here would say, so what's the point? If you want to show how great, what knowledge you have, but what's the point if no one understands it? There's no point. Now, in order for someone, we've spoken about this before, someone to have the ability to teach has to have that knowledge of whatever they're teaching. They have to have that knowledge crystal clear. Because if they don't have that knowledge crystal clear, what happens? They don't give it over well, and people don't understand it. I had somebody was telling me they were going to a certain person's class who no one should ever listen to. And the person didn't even know himself what he was talking about, but he said, I want to go in here. I said, okay, tell me what happened. Tell me what happened afterwards. So what happened? They go to hear this class. They sent me a text. They said, Rabbi, you'll never believe what happened. I went in and came out more confused than I went in. So I said, of course, makes perfect sense. Why? Because if you don't have absolute clarity, how can you give that over to someone else? It's impossible. Now, if you have a little bit of clarity, there are going to be a lot of questions. You yourself may have questions. You still can't give it over. Right? So when a person teaches to others, you have to have that clarity. Now, I mentioned before, someone makes a video. A non-Jew, doesn't matter, could have been a Jew also, but with a non-Jew, makes a video and first of all butchers every Hebrew word, right? And once somebody butchers every Hebrew word, you got to be a little bit leery, But the person made a statement, quoting from the Code of Jewish Law. I mentioned the story before. It's a good story, and the quote was, all Jewish women, married or unmarried, have to cover their hair. Now, what's the problem with this statement? Even though Rav Yosef Karo, blessed memory, makes that statement, if anyone ever lived in a Jewish community, they know single women do not cover their hair. Except maybe, let's say in Yemen, where they don't want these girls to be taken, and abused or whatever, so they made them cover their hair, okay? But in most other places, just about every other place, no single woman covered their hair. Now, you have to understand why he said what he said. It's not the topic for now, right? And why he said it, and what the context was. Because obviously, we see in the majority Jewish communities, that's not true. We don't see single women covering their hair. You see married women cover their hair, divorced women cover their hair, widows cover their hair. No question if they're divorced or widowed, why they still have to cover their hair. But that's the custom. You don't see single women covering their hair. So there are two giveaways here. One is, be careful who you listen to if they can't say any Hebrew words properly. That's the first thing. Second of all, even if they can quote something, that doesn't necessarily mean what they're saying is true. You can say, but the Code of Jewish Law says it. You're right. I can also read it. That is what the Code of Jewish Law says. But what's the context? And who agrees or disagrees? And there's disagreement. What's going on over here? Because he couldn't have meant what he said. There had to be a certain context. Okay? Right? So somebody like that, I wouldn't trust what they say. I'm not saying the person's a fraud. Person's a heretic. I'm not going that far. I don't need to go that far. But if you're going to give a class, you're going to make a video, you better darn well know what you're talking about. Because if you don't, and you just quote something, well, anyone can quote anything, right? You can quote anything, doesn't mean you know what it means, right? So, obviously, someone sent me this and said, well, is this really true? And I said, no. Right? How do I know it's not true? Because I've lived in a lot of different Orthodox communities. Modern communities, ultra-Orthodox communities, anywhere in between. No single girl I ever met covered her hair. Now, what does that tell you? That means that's not the custom. Oh, so now you're going to ask me, Rav Yosef Karo, Shulchan Aruch said it, you're right. But he said it in a certain context. And the commentaries explain what the context is. Because obviously the commentaries also understood. Nobody in Jewish communities, those single women cover their hair. So if you're going to repeat something, you better darn well know what you're repeating. You're going to go live. Roku Network, you're going to go live, right? And you're going to give something over to others. You better have clarity. If you don't have clarity,
you're up right now you're up on the Roku Network the last 3 days in a row, and you got a couple more days going still, yeah.
So that's good. So whatever, we'll go for another couple hours there, at least. So we'll keep it rolling. So we always say you got to be careful where information comes from. And a person can be called a rabbi, this and that. I'm actually going to speak about it tomorrow for Noahide Nations about what makes someone a rabbi. People, I think, are going to be shocked. Going to be very shocked at what it means today. But again, that's not the topic for now. That'll be hopefully tomorrow, 2:30 Eastern time, 9:30 Israel time. So here, back to our topic. Back to our topic. We said, the Mishnah said, you studied a lot of Torah, don't take so much credit. Now, people who keep Torah mitzvahs, are very much aware of the difficulty. They're aware of the difficulty of what it takes to learn. The Gemara says that when a person learns, what does it do? It weakens them. It makes them more tired. Why? Because you got to flex your brains. There was a study done years ago saying that we only maximize 3%. 3% of our brains. Now, most people today, greatest minds in the world, how long can they sit down and work out a problem? Before they have to take a break, smoke a cigarette, something. one of my rabbis, happened to be a genius in science also, was one of the first people in a group of others that invented plastic bottles. Plastic bottles, talking years and years ago. So he told me, he sat around these great minds, non-Jewish, Jewish, didn't really matter. These great scientific minds, they couldn't sit for more than 20 minutes at a time. They had to get up, get something to eat, have a cup of coffee, smoke a cigarette, something. They couldn't sit and focus. They couldn't sit and focus. Now, anyone sits and learns. That's all you do is focus. You're not looking at the clock and say, oh, when am I done? When do I clock out? Right? Someone who learns full time, usually they start around 9 o'clock, 9:15, they go to 1, and either they pray or they eat or whatever. They have 4 hours. Sometimes, depending on the group or the age or whatever, they'll have a class in between, whatever the case is. But pretty much if they're learning, they're learning, and let's say they don't have a class. They're learning straight. They're learning straight 9 to 1. Okay, doesn't mean not going to have a bathroom break, whatever, okay? But once you're done, that's it, you're focused. So personally, someone told me many years ago, you got it easy. All you do is, you sit and learn all day. You want to try it? You want to try it 10 hours a day? It's kind of taxing on the brain. Right? It's not so easy. So it makes you tired. That's what it does. So you got to fight off sleep, everything else. You got to dig in. It's not easy. And obviously a person's got worries and, other things on their mind. It's very easy for them to nod off. Why? Because something else is taking up that post over here. But, make no mistake, someone who's really into learning, they don't have any other issues, all things being equal, they're focused. Now, they can be focused for 2 hours on one detail of quote-unquote minutia, a minutia of detail trying to understand, a certain point. And they look this way, they look that way, this commentary, that commentary, hash it out back and forth, ask other people, they're not clear. Go through that for half an hour, 45 minutes, taxing on the brain. Taxing on the brain. So here, people keep Torah mitzvahs. They are aware of the difficulty learning Torah. They're totally aware. Why? Because they know it's hard. They know. They know, for instance, the last days of the festival, which we just went through, or some people still going through. Right? It's not over for people outside of Israel. Unless you're, I guess, in Australia or that part of the world. Right? But you started Thursday night, was the last night of Passover. So you pray late at night. You have a festive meal. Pray the next day. You have to have another festive meal. But then you got to prepare for Shabbos. Right? It's the whole thing. You're not allowed to cook from a festival to Shabbos. You're not allowed to prepare unless you make what we call a Neiv Tavshilin. Right? Neiv Tavshilin. You take an egg. You take something cooked, piece of matzah, piece of bread. You can't take bread today, so he took piece of matzah. You make a blessing. The rabbi saying, with that, you're allowed to cook. You're allowed to prepare on Friday for Shabbos. So with all the craziness, you have this meal, right? It's like 1 o'clock, 1:30, whatever it is. So now you got to start preparing, right? You got to make the cholent or whatever you're making. So you're peeling potatoes, you're peeling this, put up the soup. You got to get everything prepared. Everything has to be prepared. So everything being prepared takes time, takes effort, right? There's a lot going on. But also, you want to sleep, you want to feel a little bit refreshed, you got to learn, right? Plenty of what to learn, no question. There's a million things to do before Passover, during Passover. So people who keep Torah mitzvahs, they understand. They understand the difficulty. They work hard, continue to learn Torah, realizing what? Realizing that learning is like, what they're learning is like a drop in the ocean. So that being said, and we've said this in different ways, but that being said, how foolish a person be able to think how much Torah they know they're learning minimum, what they should be doing. I was learning earlier, we read the parsha this week, not for outside of Israel, but the parsha Acharemos, when the two sons of Aaron the Kohen died. The two sons died, Nadav and Avihu. So it's a whole discussion which I've been speaking about the last 10 weeks or so, going on 2 verses. Hit verse 3 finally, last 2 weeks ago. So there's a lot to speak about. Definitely a lot to speak about what's going on. 2 great people, and what exactly the sin was, without going into all that. I was learning something earlier, and it really hit home. It was about, Emunah. And it was about having proper faith in God and the fact that the Jewish people have a greater obligation than everybody else. Why is that? We're light into nations. So the Korban Aaron, quoted by Rabbi Chaim Coffman, chapter 16, verse 2, or actually verse 1. Rabbi Chaim Coffman 100 years ago said, in the name of this Korban Aaron, that what happened over here, when you're closer to the king, you can get burnt. So if you were a guy in the prairies, you did something wrong, you think the king cares? I don't think he cares. No offense. King doesn't care. But you're second in command. You're very close to the king. It's payback. It'll be serious payback. Right, but when you see the king do you a favor or take you out of your misery, you had some difficulty, whatever, and you go back to being the same person you are, and you're not thanking the king, obviously you have to thank the King of Kings, right? This great rabbi was saying like this, he said, he said he lived during the bombardment in 1948. And what was going on, the war, the Arabs, once the state was declared here, and they're being bombed all over the place and all kinds of things, and the miracle comes out of nowhere. Because 1967, the Egyptians retreat. Doesn't make any sense at all. Totally makes no sense at all. And they would say miracle after miracle. But what happened? He says they forgot. They forgot what happened. In other words, they prayed. Everybody prayed. People were in synagogues, secular Jews, religious Jews, praying for salvation. They never should have survived. The land of Israel should be dust today. Or at least to be run, God forbid, by other Arab countries or whatever. But the fact that Israel did not get crushed into dust is a miracle. I'm not waving my Israeli flag here, right? I just want to point out, according to history, that, the Jewish people in Israel, 21 Arab countries surrounding 21, 22, whatever it is, surrounding Israel, we shouldn't be here. There's no reason why we should be here. It makes sense rationally. But what happens? Everyone goes to synagogue. You got the ones fighting, they're also praying, whatever. And then the miracle happens. And what happens when the miracle happens? There was our strength. There was the strength of my hand. You know what they say? No atheist in a foxhole when the chips are down. Right? Achav, being roasted alive. He calls out to all the gods, nobody saves him. Calls out to the God of Israel. And he saved him. No atheist in a foxhole. But they forgot. So he says, how can you forget? This great rabbi says, how do you forget 3 minutes before you're praying to the Avos, you're praying to God over here? How in the world can you forget? And he says that's the power of the evil inclination. What, so too, let's say you have a salvation. Person has a certain salvation, whatever it is. They had no way out of it. They didn't know what was going to happen, and boom, person gets saved in different ways. Whether They were physically healed, parnasa-wise, livelihood-wise, whatever it is. And then they go back to their normal way of living. Now, if I was God, put on my funny glasses and my mustache, my George Burns glasses here, what would I say? I just saved you. You prayed to me, and I saved you. And I took you out of this mess. And you acknowledge I took you out of this mess. Now, what happened tomorrow? What happened the next day? You know, you're fed, you're eating well, everything is good. You forget. See, if you've been on both sides of the coin, you know what it's like to have, and you know what it's like to borrow money for food. Or to have less food or whatever. Or to be totally down. If you're always down and you're always scraping by, so fine. Right? That's how a person lives. That's how some people live. And they live that the majority of their lives. But if someone actually had, that's the bigger test. If someone actually had, it's taken away and you don't have, so then you appreciate what you did have. But when do you learn to appreciate what you do have? And I spoke about this last week in Pirkei, Avos, last 2 weeks. Sorry, in Duties of the Heart. In Chovos Levavos, every Tuesday, 9 o'clock Eastern Time. And that is that you got to appreciate what you have. When do we appreciate what we have? When we don't have it. How many people craved, I mean, people are nuts, but how many people craved to watch some sporting event, whatever it was, during COVID? So I heard people were so desperate when teams weren't playing, you know, whether it was hockey or basketball, whatever, they got so desperate, they watched Korean baseball. Now, Korean baseball might be good, might be interesting. Heard some people watch roller derby. I didn't even know roller derby still existed. Watch roller derby. That's how desperate people were. But finally, when games went back and there were fans, imagine being, I can't even imagine it. Imagine being a professional athlete and a person's a showboater and a person's all about how they act on the court and there ain't nobody there watching. Just the coaches and a few other people. Nobody else is watching. Kind of deflates it a little bit. You know, you would think, because that's all about ego. Or they say here in Israel, ego, right? It's all about ego. So somebody like that, we're desperate to watch. There are people desperate to watch. What happens? They had nothing to watch. They went nuts. You know, someone said, well, you got to be in isolation. And everyone was in isolation. Thank God for Netflix. Well, that's the wrong answer. How much can you watch? You know, so based on that, we have to realize, how precious life is. We have to realize how much we have. And we don't want to be on the other side. And be moaning and groaning, now I don't have. And now it's hard. But didn't you know if this happens, it's going to be hard? Of course you knew that. So then why did you take health for granted? Health is something we take for granted. Right? You'll tell me one little microbe, you got all the shots. Okay, made you feel bad for a couple of days, whatever. But you felt awful. Couldn't move. Fever.
Horrible.
Nobody wants to go through it. And I would venture to say, whatever you want to say about the vaccine, we're not even going to go there. Whatever you want to say, nobody wants to play Russian roulette. I don't know why with this, they think, oh, it's not going to kill me. It's like the flu killed, more than 1 million people? You know, I know someone who was in a coma, perfectly healthy, right? Early 40s in a coma for 2 months. 2 months. You're going to say, no, it's different. If I had a gun that had 7 bullet holes, 7 places for bullets, I place 1 bullet in there, I close it, and I say, here, put this gun to your head and shoot. It's a 1 in 7 chance. Right? A 1 in 7 chance. Right? That is a 14% chance. 14.28, if you want to get exact. How many people, unless you're an absolute moron, how many people are going to take a 14.28% chance and blow their brains out? I don't think anybody. I think if it was double that, nobody would do it. I think if it was triple that, nobody would do it. They'd be terrified. But you're going to say, if I'm healthy and I'm relatively young, nothing should happen. You're right. But there were teenagers that died. There was a story of someone in Muncie, he's 35. He was 35, 4 kids, 2 days. 2 days he died. So God is showing a message. It's giving a message. Doesn't matter. If he wants you to go, that's when you're going to go. But he wants to show, a person can have no underlying things, and that one thing could kill you. Could totally kill you. Now, why do people want to take a chance with that? I don't have a good answer. My good answer is I think people are stupid. That's my answer. Right? Not very popular to say. I saw great people who were willing to take the chance. Doesn't make sense. In any other medical situation, people would not chance it. Right? But there was so much conspiracy said about it. In other things, people said, nah, it's just like the flu. It's just like this. Now, at the beginning, that might have been true, except tens of hundreds and thousands of people were dying. So you're going to say a lot of the people that died were over 70. The vast majority. Even if that's true, if you say that more than, I don't know, it's more than 1 million, 2 million people, whatever it is, however many people died, from COVID. So if you want to say 90%, right, then that means you still have 300,000, give or take, that were not part of that. And not, how many people die in the States from the flu a year? 50,000? It's usually, I think, 20,000, 30,000. That's 6 times the amount. So now we know it's not like the flu. It's stronger than the flu. More people died from it. Forget about the vaccine, forget about anything else. My question is, why in the world would people take a chance? I don't have an answer. It doesn't make sense logically. But the point anyway, not to digress here, the point is people forget what they have. When a person's perfect health, give or take, they get the flu, they're knocked out for a couple of days. When they come back to normal, and now they can finally eat, they're not throwing up or whatever, and they can get out of bed, and they can act in a normal way, whatever that is. Isn't it true? What happens a couple of days later? They're now 100% back to normal. What happens? They go back to normalcy. They forget. They forget what it felt like when they were flat in their back. The next time it happens, then they remember. But now they're going through it again. So we are 100% creatures of habit. When things are going good, we don't remember the bad. We're certainly not going to pray as well, etc. We forget. And God has to wake us up. God has to show us. Now, why does he have to do that? Why don't we get the message? It's the same thing over and over and over. It's not like we don't see what happens. It's not like, we come to Rosh Hashanah and we read that prayer in Musaf in the additional service where it speaks about who by fire, who by water, right? And who's going to die. We know there are people that are not here that died last year. Now, there could be older people, could be younger people, but they're not here. My Rebbe says like this. If everybody died the same age, right? If everybody died the same age, no one ever would repent. Right? Nobody would ever repent. Ever. Who's going to repent? Nobody. That way, when we see things happen, and God forbid tragedy, should wake us up. And if we say, God forbid, this is a normal thing, The Rambam says at the beginning of the laws of fasting, if a person says this tragedy is like a normal type of thing, it's a chance happening, they're called cruel. They're considered cruel. Why? Because nothing happens for no reason. Nothing. Nothing happens for no reason. For no reason. So that's heresy. That is absolute heresy. So, says the Rambam. So the Rambam says, he says we got to understand there's no such thing as things happening by chance. Who is that? That's Amalek. That's what Amalek said. And that idea exists in the world. And it still exists. Because people will say stuff happens. Stuff absolutely happens. When a person says that and they see tragedy and they say, hey, it's a chance happening, says the Rambam, that's an act of cruelty. And we're not getting the message. Now, you could say, come on. Let's say someone dies ripe old age. It's also tragic. Should never be death. And even when great people die, even they live till 90, 100, it's all because of us. Sins cause them to die. Are you going to say, but they live the ripe old age? So what? They're still accomplishing. They're still accomplishing. So here, we forget. And we forget very basic things. This is something, as the Path of the Just, Mesil Zasharim says, I'm not telling you anything that nobody knows. This is obvious. This is very obvious. Now, the question is, so why don't we think about it? Because we're too busy. We're too busy chasing our tails. We're too busy living life. And we forget. So we got to take time. We got to take time and take stock of what we do. We got to think about what we do, what we want to accomplish day in and day out. It's one of the reasons the Jew, when they wake up in the morning, they wash their hands. And they thank God for giving us back our soul. Because either we touch the place that's normally covered, so we have to wash our hands, or God returns our soul. If He didn't return our soul, we'd be dead. So we're thankful for that. So we consider a new creation every day. If we're considered a new creation every day, yesterday doesn't matter. Yesterday, forget what you did. Forget maybe you did terrible things. Today's a new day. As my Rebbe would say, you live in the past, you have no future. Doesn't mean you whitewash it. You know, doesn't mean you're all excited for a CFL training camp, right? Forget about that. Forget about that. Pre-season, right? Who cares, right? In general, right? But, you know, if I thought that the day before, today's a new day, right? See, Dan, there's still hope for you. There's still hope for all of us, right? There's still hope, right? But how foolish a person over here. I mean, we can speak about this for days about gratitude. Gratitude. You know, and sometimes God will throw us a little bit of a bone here and there and say, see, I'm still here. You worried about this? You worried about that? What are you worried about? I took care of you. Might not have been pretty. Might needed it 2 days before, a month before, but okay. But we forget. We forget. Now, one thing I also wanted to mention is the fact that if God takes us out, we mentioned this before, if God takes us out of something, whatever it is, whether being sick, livelihood, any number of things, or let's say the issues with our kids, whatever it is, and you know, and something gets solidified. You know, something gets taken care of. Now, what happens if you don't acknowledge that? or you don't acknowledge it the way God wants you to acknowledge it. Right? That was the claim on Abraham. See, he didn't make a party for Yitzchak when he had Yitzchak. It was a tremendous claim against him, which wasn't true. Right? But that was what Mr. Ants wanted to make a claim against Yitzchak over here. Right? He wasn't thankful enough because God made an absolute miracle. His wife, according to nature, never should have had kids. Never. Changed her nature altogether. But what could happen? And I've heard my Rebbe say this many times. What could happen? What could happen is that God took you out of a certain situation. You didn't get the message. You weren't thankful. You went back to being the same schnook you were before. What can happen in such a case? God can say, oh, you didn't thank me enough. You didn't do what I want you to do. You went like nothing happened. So what does God over here say? I'm going to make your life a misery now. I'm going to turn your life upside down. That's what I'm going to do. Because you didn't get the message. So over here, how foolish a person is going to be thinking, how much Torah I know. And even if it's true. A person learned a lot of Torah. So what? Compared to who? We mentioned this before. Compared to who? Compared to people who can't read Aleph Beis? Compared to 90% of world Jewry, the most important question they may ever ask is, I put ketchup or mustard on my hot dog? Who are you comparing to? You want to compare yourself to other people in the generation who know how to learn? Oh, now you're not doing so well. Right? At the same time, even if you learned a lot of Torah, how foolish they are, when we know we're only learning minimally what we should be doing. I'll give an example. During intercession from yeshiva. During intercession, either right after Sukkot or right after Passover, you have about a week. You got about a week or so when yeshiva students go back to learning. So they have a week free. So a student went once to the Chazon Ish of Avram Mishai Karowitz, a blessed memory, Torah giant of the last generation, and he asked the Chazon Ish, how much should I learn in intercession? So the Chazon Ish said, according to the Rambam, he said, according to the Rambam holds that someone who works, they should work really 3 hours, 4 hours, whatever it is, and they should be really learning for 8 hours or 9 hours. He said really 9 hours. So he said, so you're in intercession. You should learn like a balabas, like someone who works. And he said that should be about 9 hours. So the yeshiva student said, 9 hours? I don't even learn that when I'm full-time learning in yeshiva. Kind of depressing, you think about it. But, so you're going to tell me, okay, a person works, and they work how many hours? 6 hours a day, 8 hours a day if you're a guy, because a Jewish guy has no obligation to learn when he's not working. So he's gonna come home, say hello to his wife and his kids a little bit, eat something, he goes to learn. You should be learning at least a couple hours a day. At least. You gotta have fixed time. But that's the only permissibility to work. You're not gonna say he's gonna learn 8 hours, doesn't have that amount of time. Right? But I remember hearing this years ago, that, person's gonna learn, even if they have to learn a profession, they should learn a profession that should give them the ability to learn as much as possible. Now, it's not always so easy. Right? Definitely not always so easy. But regardless, going to maximize that amount. We have to maximize that amount of time. So over here, a person's going to say, oh, look how much I know. I learned this, I learned that. That's great. Again, what are we comparing to? And not only that, how well do you know it? Right? If you ask someone about certain statistics about something, and they start rattling off like this, And then you ask them something about something they learned last week, they can't remember. It's going to be the ultimate embarrassment over here. So if we're really scratching the surface, and that's essentially what we're doing. If we're really scratching the surface, right? If you're really scratching the surface, why do we think we're so great? We should never think we're so great over here. Because we're only learning minimally what we should be doing. Now, what's the obvious question? The $1.5 million is we always up the ante. The $1.5 million question is, if I'm only going to end up learning minimally anyway, why bother? There's no point. I'm only going to scratch the surface anyway. So that would be an easy way out. The person going to say, see, I don't have to learn. Because I'm not going to learn that much anyway. How much can I possibly learn? So we've spoken about how, Torah upholds the world. And how much a person can even learn in a small amount of time. So I mentioned the example. I know somebody, I don't know if they still do it today, but I know somebody every Thursday for 15 minutes, not an hour, not a half an hour, not 45 minutes, 15 minutes. For 15 minutes, one day a week, they would learn a Muster book with someone else, write a book on ethics. So you're going to say, how much can you accomplish in 15 minutes? What do you read? A paragraph? Maybe a couple paragraphs? How much can you really accomplish? So over the years, Path of the Just, they finished. Ways of the Righteous. Gates of Repentance. Right? It's not about quantity. Not about how quickly a person goes through something, not have any understanding. That doesn't mean anything. It's about quality. That a person can learn even 10 minutes, 15 minutes on a daily basis, couple days, whatever. Over time, they're going to cover ground. So here you're looking at a book, it's 500 pages. How am I ever going to get through it? I have to spend hours and hours. So you break it down. Spend 10 minutes. Let's say in a Musar Sefer, Book of Ethics. People learn for 20 minutes a day, 15 minutes a day, whatever it is. But over time, you're going to cover ground. Now, again, it doesn't mean I just read it like a newspaper. That would be very easy. Just read it like a chimp. You just read it like a Kopalma, like a monkey. You get maybe something out of it, but you can't read it like you read a newspaper. You got to think about what it says. You got to understand. Again, we're not talking Kabbalistic intention. You got to understand what it says and what it means. Right? And what's going on. And if you don't understand, you got to go ask someone what it means. You can't go further. You can't go further and say, well, I didn't understand this, so, I'll keep going. Now, again, you can't get stuck on it for days either. Right? You got to keep certain level of a pace, but, you don't have to wait till you get that question answered. Just try and get it answered, but again, it shouldn't be too much time to go by, otherwise you get stuck over here. But we cannot rely on the fact and say, well, I'm only learning at a certain level, and that's all I'm ever going to get to, right? Let's say you're like everybody else, and you're only going to learn minimally what we're supposed to do. So then a person can get very dejected. Very easily they could say, it's not worth it. Why bother? I'm never going to reach that level. But if a person says, I'm never going to reach that level, they'll never reach it. They'll never do it. Why won't they do it? Because their nature will tell them not to do it. Their nature will work hard against them not to do it. Why? Simple. Because the nature will say you can't do it. It's too hard. Right? You're only going to scratch the surface anyway. It's a good excuse. It's a very good excuse. At the same time, we have to think ourselves, what are my actions going to be like Avraham, Yitzhak, and Yaakov? That's what we have to think. You're going to say, come on, Avraham, Yitzhak, Yaakov. A person should say, when are my actions going to be like Rabbi Akiva Eiger, the Chasam Sofer, other great rabbis, the Rambam, because we're striving for the top. We want to hit the top even if we don't make it, right? Famous story of Baruch Ber. Baruch Ber, the rabbi of Kamenetz, many, many years ago. Baruch Ber said, I strive to be like Rabbi Akiva Eiger. I wanted to be as great as Rabbi Akiva Eiger. And I ended up being Baruch Ber. Because he said, if I would have strived to be like Baruch Ber, I would have been anything. So we want to be greater. We want to strive. You're going to say, but if a person puts themselves on that level, and wants to reach that pedestal, who says they're going to be able to do it? Maybe they won't be able to do it. But at the same time, if you strive for a smaller pedestal, so you could have been greater. Why settle for something much below what a person could potentially reach? Right? So my Rebbe says, if a person thinks small, they'll end up small. If they think big, they might not end up big, but they won't end up small. Now, what does that mean exactly? It means we have to have dreams. We have to want to accomplish things. For a person of learning, they want to go through certain books. For a guy, they want to go through Shas. They want to go through the entire Talmud. Right? Or they want to go through Tanakh or whatever. Women should also have, when they have time to learn. They should also learn whatever applies to them. But there has to be goals. A person can't just learn. The problem today, just in general, people learn very good. And they're learning for many years, but they don't come out with very much. They don't accomplish very much. Why? Because they're not focused. They're not focused. And if they would be focused, little bit, they accomplish. That's what they do. That's what they have the ability to do. Now, at the same time, we said before, people who keep Torah mitzvahs are aware of the difficulty in learning Torah. It's hard. Not to mention, the person doesn't get paid that much. Okay, different issues. But learning itself, we're just talking about learning. It's hard. Not easy. And a person gets bogged down in different things and say, I can't learn, or it's too hard, or, that's the way of the evil inclination. Total work of the evil inclination. But again, how foolish a person would be to think what I'm doing is so great. But you have to have a little bit of, self-esteem. You got to say what I'm doing is helping the world. It's keeping the world going, because we said way back when, the world stands on three things. Torah, Avodah, Gimel Chesed. Right? Stands on Torah, Avodah. What's Avodah? Either sacrifices or prayer. And Chesed, acts of loving kindness. So if it stems on Torah, if the whole point is that Torah is upholding the world, then what does it matter that a person may learn minimally or not? Shouldn't matter. Right? Totally shouldn't matter over here. Right? And the reason is very simple. Because no matter how much I accomplish, no matter how much a person accomplishes, no matter what they do, it's still sacred in God's eyes. Tremendously sacred. Because on the flip side, a person can say, well, I'm only doing the minimal. What I should be doing. So what? I still have to do it. I still have to learn. But how do you know that's not going to affect you and you're not going to learn 10 times more? And you're not going to be inspired. And you're not going to want to learn more. Some people say, I don't have it in me. You don't know. Person doesn't know. Rabbi Chaim, Hashem Yikam Damoy, God should avenge his blood. Rabbi Chaim Wasserman, a blessed memory, famous student of the Rabbi Chaim, said on himself And he was one of the Torah giants, the last generation. And he said on himself he had mediocre memory. Right? He wasn't, God didn't gift him with, a tremendous IQ. We see that, by a lot of the Torah giants, they were geniuses. Total geniuses. So it helps to have photographic memory, to be a genius. These things help. Definitely help over here. But he said, I didn't have that. So they asked him, so how'd you become who he became? He said, it was a lot of hard work. Constant learning. That's what did it. Constant learning. You don't look up for a second. When you're learning, you're learning. And you learn to the best of your ability. So even if you're going to maximize the minimum amount, who says you're going to be part of that? Who says you're not going to go beyond that? You're going to say, well, go according to the majority. This is what majority people do. But Torah is infinite. Meaning the soul itself can take in a tremendous amount. Tremendous amount. Never gets tired. Never gets tired of learning. Body might get tired. Soul doesn't. So, with tremendous amount of learning, I just read an article about one of the Torah giants of this generation. This is a total different plane. Different plane. Prays many, many hours. Learns, secludes himself, other things. Sleeps, barely eats. Etc. Okay, that's not most people. Right? I'm not saying most people should strive to want to be such a, aesthetic over here. And be like that and, not eat, not sleep and all that. But you have people that are able to reach different levels. I don't think, I didn't, as I was reading, it didn't tell me, you have to be an absolute genius. He's got 125 IQ and all that. But he works very, very, very hard in a lot of different areas. So God's gifted him a lot of things. So who says, even if we know, right? We'll just harp on this point for a second. Even if we know we're only learning minimally what we can. So why should we look on the other side? And why should we say, oh, that's bad. I'm only learning minimally. All these different things. What about what I have the ability to do? What about that? So who says I should just say, well, this is what's going to be. This is what people are doing. So I'm going to be the same. Right? That we should never say. That 100% we should never say. Because that's very easy for the evil inclination. Because the evil inclination will say, see, nobody's really doing so much anyway. You're not going to be able to maximize. So if you're not going to be able to maximize, so do the minimal anyway. Just do the bare minimal. But doing the bare minimal is equivalent of striving to be mediocre. Doesn't matter if that's the end result. What matters is the effort I put in. So I have to put in the effort. Now, I'll use myself as an example. Right? So I knew how to read Hebrew, follow a service, so I had it a little bit easier, than other people. But in general, I had to start from scratch. Start Mishnah from scratch, Chumash from scratch, all these things. It's because I could read, didn't really matter. Once I knew how to break down verbs and other things, okay. But that also took time. So everything we do, we're building blocks. You're going to say, well, at the beginning, what did I really accomplish? I spent a year learning how to learn Mishnah, okay. Learn how to read the Gemara. Could I still learn it by myself? No. Probably need a good couple years. Right, doing it on a daily basis. But be that as it may, over time it got easier. Why? Because a lot of terms come up, same terms come up. So you have to remember what the context is and what it means. And then you have to learn how to analyze. Learning how to analyze, totally different thing. That's a totally different thing because we're not taught how to think. Right? In general, we're not taught how to think. Go through university, it's a lot of spit back information. Right? Could be multiple choice, could be fill in the blanks, whatever, writing essays. But basically, you're spitting back information. Maybe you have some class where you actually have to think, extrapolate, put things together. Okay. There are subjects like that. I'm not going to say none. But I mentioned this last week. I mentioned, a number of times. When I went back to university, learning the Tosfos, on a piece of Gemara was a lot harder than any of my classes. Why? Because there you have to think. Here it's about processing information. Taking information. I was a history major, so I had to take a lot of information, write term papers, take tests, whatever. But I was taking information and basically, analyzing information. So analyzing history, I don't think is a heck of a lot. I think it's a heck of a lot easier. Than learning Torah. Learning Torah is very hard. Very, very hard. Taxes the brain. So learning what happened in history and applying it and this and that, I don't think it's that hard. There are other things, engineering, medicine, biology, chemistry. I'm not saying these things are easy. Not, by any stretch. They're different disciplines. But see, once you get certain things down, the information doesn't really change that much. Right? It doesn't change that much. It's a lot of memorization. It's a lot of knowing this reacts to this and this reacts to that and different things or whatever. Right? But, when it comes to learning Torah, putting things together, Torah, as we said, is as wide as the earth as wide as the ocean, is as long as the earth. So you got, 3,700 and so on pages of Talmud, plus all the commentaries. Trying to put all that together, it takes work. It takes a lot of work. In these other disciplines, I get the information, I got it down, I get it down. It doesn't, we mentioned this before, it doesn't change that much. Law does not change that much. Medicine does not change that much. You tell me there are innovations, different things, fine. But the base of it doesn't change. Torah's all inclusive. Right? It's, someone walks into a house, they see 2,000, 3,000 books, and they come on, how could you possibly know all this? There's a lot to learn. They would never say that by a doctor or a lawyer because they come on, all these different books, they're going to say because they respect it. They respect what they're doing. By Torah, they don't respect but the knowledge. But the knowledge out there is a lot to know. Tremendous amount to know, to put things together and how Jewish law works. Not a simple thing. Not a simple thing. So what do we say over here? Even though we're saying a person is only learning minimally what they should be doing, who's saying that's what I'm striving for? Who says I'm striving for mediocrity? I'm not interested in striving for mediocrity. Right? Baruch Ber said, if I strive to be Baruch Ber, I wouldn't have been anything. The fact I strive to be Rabbi Akiva Eger, I ended up like a Baruch Ber. But you have to have goals. You have to strive for something. You want to accomplish things. I'm not just saying going through the motions, but you want to do it right. You want to do it properly. It takes efforts. It weakens a person. That's what it does. But guess what? It makes us think. We're saying over today, there are a lot of potential reasons why Nadav and Avihu died. Well, one, they brought a strange fire, or they brought incense in the Holy of Holies when they weren't supposed to. They gave over, Jewish law in front of Moshe, when they weren't allowed to. Or when they said, when are these two old people, Moshe and Aaron, going to die? There are a lot of different reasons. But if you look at Leviticus chapter 10, and you look at Leviticus chapter 16, seems like there are different reasons. Totally different reasons. I spoke for a number of weeks just on that one verse, chapter 16, verse 1. Book of Leviticus. It's complicated. It's extremely complicated. There are a lot of different reasons, but what in the world is going on? Which one is it? The Torah says, you're not allowed to drink wine, in order to serve in the temple. Right? Is that the reason? Is it the reason they brought the strange fire? Is it the reason they brought incense into the Holy of Holies, not on Yom Kippur? So what's the answer? Exactly. It's complicated. Some things I would say are more straightforward, some things less straightforward, but you got to put the sources together. When you're putting the sources together, okay, now how does it look and this and that? That's work. It's not an overnight thing. Problem is, we want everything instantaneous. We want everything to be easy. And people come to me with questions. I always say, come on, Google didn't give you the answer. Rabbi Dr. Google didn't give you the answer. Right? So come to me when Rabbi Dr. Google didn't give an answer. But people have to think. They shouldn't be spoon-fed. Today, everything's very easy. They have to know where to look for information, but everything's instantaneous. They want an answer. Like, someone used to ask me questions about different things, and I said, you don't know how to learn. You need to go to yeshiva to learn. Someone asked me a question on the Mishnah, on a certain Mishnah, but they didn't have any other basics in order to know how to answer it. So to me, it was an obvious question. I say, oh, come on, you have other knowledge. You're right. But this person never learned. So if they never learned, obviously, okay, I'm not saying it's not a question per se, but if they know other things and they would know how to learn, it'd be a different issue. Right? So the problem is, I'm not saying people can't ask questions. People can ask as many questions as they want. Right? The reality is, you got to think first. And I'm pretty convinced, I may be wrong, I don't think so, but I'm pretty convinced that a lot of times people ask questions is because they don't think for themselves. They don't want to think for themselves. Or they'll say, well, I don't know the answer. Okay, you don't know the answer. Now, you can't look it up in books because, you don't know Hebrew or other things. Right? So you go to Google, see if you get an answer from Google. Now, sometimes it might be confusing, this, that, but people want instantaneous answers. Now, the real trademark of a Torah scholar is that they can answer anywhere. You ask a question of blessings, they can answer. They ask in Shabbos, they can answer. Right? In other words, the Torah we learn should be so clear, so absolutely clear. Someone asks the question, we have an answer like that. Now, what's the problem? We forget. We forget. Now, how do we not forget? How do we work on our brains to remember? You got to review. Reviewing blessings, not so fun. Reviewing laws of Shabbos, maybe not so fun. All right, I've gone through them. Whatever. Go through them again. Make sure you don't make mistakes. But that's what it has to be. You have to know. Now, again, there is a difference between men and women. Women don't have that obligation. They have to know how to keep Shabbos. That's for sure. They have to listen to classes. That's also true when they have time. But a guy has to know. Right? A guy has to know. So someone came to Rav Yisrael Salanter, a blessed memory, and asked him what he should learn. I only have a certain amount of time to learn. I have an hour of time to learn, let's say, during the day. What should I learn? Should I learn Talmud? Should I learn Halacha, Jewish law? So Rav Yisrael Salanter said he was the founder of the Musar movement, right? The founder of the ethics movement. So what did he say? Should learn Musar. Should learn books of ethics. Now, people are astounded. Why don't you tell them to learn Gemara? Why don't you tell them to learn, halacha, things that are more practical in that sense? So Rav Yisrael Salanter answered very simple. He said, when they learn Musar and they realize what they have to do, they're going to find they have more time to learn. They're going to find they have more time to learn. Right? That's why I told them to learn Musar. But again, a person cannot rest on their laurels over here. In my own case, learning as much as I've learned and plenty much more for me to learn, we're not interested, as we mentioned, by the famous story, the Netziv of Naftali Tzvi from Berlin, famous head of the Shiva after Rabbi Chaim of Volozhin. And we don't want to get nailed after 120 years and realize and hear, how come you didn't reach X potential? But I already learned the Pirkei Avos. Didn't we say you're only going to learn minimally anyway? We're not even learning what we really should be at that level. Right? So why bother? Why not rest on my laurels? But you got potential. You got potential over here. You don't want to hear after 120 years. I mean, we're all going to hear it to a certain extent. I mean, God forbid. But God's going to play that second movie. First movie was what you did in this world. Every last thought, etc. Second movie is what you could have done. What your potential was. Now that's part of what hell is. It's about knowing and acknowledging I could have been better and I didn't. And realize I had greater potential and I wasted it. Because doesn't King David say we're only in this world for 70 years? If we have strength, we're here for 80 years. Nobody knows how long they're going to be here for. So we're going to make the best of it. Now, so that's the idea of how foolish a person would be to think, look, I learned all this Torah. When the reality is, we're scraping the surface. Now, even based on that, we've done more than 100 shows, right? 100 shows and change. And you would think we were going to finish, or at least we would hit the third chapter, fourth chapter, something. And we're still chapter 2, Mishnah 9. Right? Now, I've gone off topic a number of times. Doesn't matter. The point is there's a lot here. There's a lot here for us to focus on. There's a lot here for us to understand. So, you're going to say, but we're not tackling Pirkei Avos in a minimalistic way. You're right. As Dan the man would say, we're hitting it hard. That's what we do. We're taking out the difficulty and trying to make it user-friendly. But it's deep. Right? There's a lot here. And we want to maximize what we do in this world. We want to have a full day. Let's say this day finishes, tomorrow finishes. We take stock and say, did I maximize? Did I maximize what I should have done? How was I with other people? How did I speak to others? How did I pray? How did I make blessings? How did I do other things in which God wanted me to do? We have to take stock. And I think if a person would be honest and where they're holding in the world and not being a faker here, not say, hey, I'm great at 90% of world Jewry, forget it. Where are you in God's eyes right now? What did you accomplish today or not accomplish? What did you do or not do? And I think if a person was totally honest, we wouldn't get out of bed. We'd be too embarrassed. Way too embarrassed. So, even what we do accomplish, if we didn't accomplish to the fullest, then maybe you could say, I could hang my hat and say, come on. We're only doing what minimally we're supposed to do anyway. But you went a little bit beyond that. Very good. Wasn't there more to do? Don't we have more obligations? We have more obligations. 100% we have more obligations. And the reality is we have an obligation not to be lazy. And we live in a lazy generation. Wash clothes, throw them in the washing machine, dryer, hang them up, got these machines, make things a lot easier. We're 100% lazy today. Lazy. So how do we beat that out of ourselves? So I gave over today, or I saw, I gave over during Passover. Victor Miller, blessed memory, right, was asked the question, about showing our children, even ourselves, and our families, the spark of fire of Torah. How do we pass that down? How do we give that over? So we said before what? We said that person judged on Rosh Hashanah for what they did on Passover at night. How much did they work on their emunah? By giving over the Haggadah, by saying over the words of the Haggadah. In such a way they just say it over, rub it up double, let's eat. Or they get into the story and tell over the story and the miracle and all that. And they gave it over with the fire. The kids embellished, they had a great time. All this. It's tremendous. It's tremendous. But we're judged on that. Totally judged on that. Right? Comes Rosh Hashanah, that's what we're judged on. One of the things. We're judged on what we do, what we did during the year. But according to the Zohar, we're judged on what we gave over at that night on Passover. Pretty scary thought. So how do you do that? So the Rambam says, that's a little bit different version. The Haggadah says, we have to see ourselves we came out of Egypt. The Rambam says, not see ourselves, lir'ot, but leheira'ot. What does leheira'ot mean? To demonstrate. How do you demonstrate? Because you got matzah, maror, bitter herbs in front of you. Right? But you're telling over the story with the fire. That's how you demonstrate. You sing, you tell over stories. That's how you demonstrate. So day in and day out, that's what we have to do. We have to have that fire lit. Now you're going to say, that's hard because we get beaten down in life. Okay? We're not going to deny that. Very easy to get beaten down in life. No question about it. Doesn't matter. We said before, the soul comes back in the body, you wake up. You wake up, okay, a little bit tired, this, that. You wake up, new day. New day to serve God. New day to make blessings. New day to learn. Take things on. Can't do things by rote. Spoke about that. Doing things by rote is akin to spiritual death. Right? I spoke a few weeks ago in the book of Leviticus about that. Tremendous amount to speak about there. But we're not going to go there. You have to live every day like it's your last. That's what we have to do. That's our obligation. That's how you keep the fire lit. Because who knows what tomorrow's going to bring. King Solomon says in Proverbs, we mentioned before, you don't know what today's going to bring. You certainly don't know what tomorrow's going to bring. So you can't say, well, tomorrow I'll learn. I'll push it off. Can't push it off. Why not? Because you don't know what tomorrow's going to bring. You have no idea. Forget tomorrow. Today, how do you know what today's going to bring? You don't know. 100% you don't know. Can't rest on your laurels. You can't think, oh, I'm happy being mediocre. God doesn't want mediocrity. He's not interested in mediocrity. And if we're the ones that are doing what we should be doing, so what? Forget about the rest of the world. We're not measured against what other people are doing. God's not going to ask, how come, you're not like this one or that one or the other one. He's going to say, why aren't you doing what you need to do? Forget about what other people do. Forget about 90% of the world Jewry. Doesn't know Aleph. They don't know what Shema Yisrael means. Okay? What does that have to do with you? Or someone will say, this Orthodox Jew got caught doing something. I don't do that. I didn't do that, so why do I have to keep Torah mitzvahs? That's not the answer. That's not the question, let's say better. You're going to get judged for who you are. Forget about what someone else did. They're going to get judged, don't worry. God will take care of them. God 100% will take care of them. I don't have to worry. God's not going to take care of them. God will take care of them. God for sure will take care of them. They're going to get judged. But what does that have to do with you? Is it a convenient excuse? Oh, these Orthodox Jews did this. And I saw them do that. And blah, blah, so what? What do I care what they did? They're wrong if they're wrong. They desecrated God's name if that's the case. So what? What does that have to do with you? Nothing. It's just a convenient excuse. Convenient excuse. So the reality is, people say, we're only learning minimally. We're only doing very little what we need to do. Again, what difference does it make? We have to make the best effort we can. Regardless what we end up doing. You see, again, this is something, a little bit close to my heart because, anyone's read the book Derech Hashem, The Way of God, that changed my life. Why? Talks about potential. Talks about what sin does. Talks about what the evil inclination does. Talks about the fact that we come back as a reincarnated person. right, into another. A soul can come back. All these different things. What's the purpose of life? Many different things. That being said, it's about potential. It's about what am I doing here? It's not what everyone else around me is doing. Even if you live in an Orthodox community and there's some people not doing what they should or whatever, doesn't matter what they're doing. It matters what you do. They'll get punished, and God forbid Jewish people might get punished in the process. The reality is we have to do what we need to do. That's what we have to do. And that in and of itself, we're going to get judged whatever we should be doing. If we're not doing what we're supposed to be doing, that's going to be a problem. We're not going to judge in the future where we're holding now, where we should be holding, according to what we've done. So potential to me, again, my opinion here, potential is everything. Why do I say it's everything? Because nobody knows what their potential is. Nobody knows what they have the power to do. And there are stories of many people who started off as nothing, ended up becoming whoever they became. Many different stories. But we don't know. We may just, I'll use one example. Not a good example. I'll use one example. Take someone like Einstein. Did anyone think Einstein growing up, he's going to become what he did? Nobody. One of the greatest students, was lazy, other things. Nobody expected that. Yeah, okay, it might have been a great heretic also, but no one expected him to do what he did. No one saw it. Other people can see, potentially see, how much they know from a very young age and how they apply it, different things, okay. So it makes sense what they could end up doing in the future. Someone you don't see any potential in, really. You don't expect it. But guess what? It can come out. It can come out in different ways we never expect. So, I speak about this a lot because I think it's important. And people have to realize we have no idea what our potential is. No idea. Anyone's been in this process, came out of paganism, Baal Tshuva, someone wants to convert, whatever it is, wherever they came from, they're not the same person they were before. Hopefully they're not the same person they were 2 days ago, a week ago, a month ago, certainly 6 months ago, a year ago, 2 years ago. They're not the same. They can't be the same. Because someone who's searching for truth, no matter what level they're on, every single thing is a building block. The building block. You might not remember this, you might not remember that, but you have a heck of a lot more knowledge than you did before. And you're going in the right direction. However slow it is, doesn't matter. But a person's going in that direction. So a person can't say, I didn't gain. I never gained over here. Not true. Because I guarantee wherever they were before, they're not the same. They can't be the same. It's impossible. And they have different level of knowledge than they had before. I don't think there's any question. Because now they're seeing things the way they need to be seen. That's a whole different thing. Right? That's a whole different level over here. But that's progress. That's a tremendous amount of progress. Why? Very simple. Because what they knew before, they didn't really know. And where they're holding before is a whole different world. So I think no matter where a person's holding now, and at whatever level, they should be kissing the ground that they're going in the right path. That's for sure. That's for sure. Even if it's hard, there could be all kinds of problems, different things. But guess what? They're the richest people in the world. Because now they're going in the right path. So now they're taking baby step by baby step, etc. Okay. But we can't rest over here. We can't take things for granted. We mentioned that before. There's nothing we can take for granted. Knowledge you can't take for granted. Because if a person learns something, you have to remember it. You have to review. Like we said many times, if you don't review, Everyone likes to learn new things. But if you don't review the old things, you don't remember that. And that you have to know. Right? That you have to review. How's the person going to know what to do on Shabbos if you don't review the laws? Or a festival. What happens when a festival hits Shabbos? What do I do? These are things you have to know. Comes up. Shabbos comes up every week. Blessings come up every day. Right? Even by a non-Jew. Things that don't apply. Right? Whatever applies to them. Okay. Maybe it's not as intense. Listen, all you have to do is learn Musar. All you have to do is, if you learn ethics, come on. It's a whole different world. Whole different world. Knowing what I'm obligated in. And the severity of what I do. That's enough to change a person. Change the way they think. Right? Again, it's effort. It takes a lot of effort. Rabbi Chaim said, change one thing in their life. In their life, one character trait is a lot. Doesn't mean we don't have to work. Doesn't mean we don't have to understand. Plenty what to do. Plenty what to do, but we have to realize, as we mentioned before, what we're doing is like a drop in the bucket. Or, as I said here, a drop in the ocean. Doesn't matter. It's still what I have to do. I'm still obligated to do it. I don't just say, wow, what's the big deal? I'm only keeping minimal anyway, so I'll do whatever. We have greater obligation. Tremendously greater obligation. Over here, we can't rest on our laurels. Person can never do such a thing. We have to know who we are. We have to know what we've done. We have to take ourselves seriously, even if it's hard. Because looking in the mirror is not an easy thing. Knowing what we've done, what we've said to others, a lot of things. We definitely do not want to own up to what we've done. And not only that, even if we do, then we say, how can I go further? How in the world can I go further over here? Doesn't make any sense. Too hard. Right? The reality is, comes on the evil inclination, Moreno Verabenu, Mr. S. And, it convinces us. Come on. You really think they're going to accept you? Come on. You think God's going to forgive you? Look what you've done. You think repentance really helps over here? A lot of things. Evil inclination come bam, bam, bam. Knock you out. That's what evil inclination's good at. The person makes a mistake, they have to say, listen, made a mistake. I want to work hard, try and fix it. God, I need your help over here. But you can't just make the mistake and say, okay, God's going to understand. I'm going to do tshuva. You can't do that. That the Mishnah says explicit. Tractate Yuma, last chapter. So the person says, I'm going to sin and I'm going to repent. I'm going to sin, I'm going to repent. Can't repent. That doesn't help. If a person sinned, they have to ask God for forgiveness. Not they're going to ask forgiveness and repent on purpose. Right? That doesn't make any sense. That's going to be a lot harder. It's going to be a lot harder. So in the end, it doesn't matter, we said before. It does not matter one iota what goes on around us. What other people are doing. God is going to judge us according to us. Right? Not so comforting over here. He's going to judge us for what we've done, not for what someone else has done. God doesn't care what someone else did. He's going to judge you according to you. And even if we think what we're doing is a drop in the ocean, which is true, it doesn't matter. We have to put our best foot forward. We have to work hard regardless. We're not interested in just doing minimal. We want to do what we need to do. We want to reach potential, whatever that potential is. That's what we have to do. Now, there's another aspect over here. And that is that a person, we mentioned before, as the Mishnah tells us, you studied a lot of Torah, don't take credit for yourself. That's what you're created to do. So even if a person learned a lot, they shouldn't think they're so great at learning Torah because there's so much more to learn, right? That we mentioned. But what should they do with their knowledge? So let's say They have more knowledge. Okay. Person has more knowledge. So what should they do with the knowledge? Should they keep it to themselves? Should they give it over? So, give it over to others. So a person, as we said before, they shouldn't think they're so great in learning Torah. Because the purpose of learning Torah is what? It's not just to change yourself. And not just to work on yourself, but also give it over to others if the person has the ability. What do we say in the Shema? Paragraph before the Shema in the morning. Lilmod lamed lishmor v'lasois. Lilmod, person got an obligation to learn Torah. Lamed, person got an obligation to teach Torah if they can. If they have that ability. Lishmor to God the Torah, lasos to keep it. Right, so what do we have over here? We have that if a person has the ability to teach, not everybody does. There are people with great minds, great amount of knowledge, tremendous amount of knowledge. They can't give it over to others. They just can't bring it down to this world to explain to others. Right? So there's some that don't have that ability, to do so. But if a person does, and a person would be surprised, say, well, how much do I really know? Right? You'd be surprised. Why do I say that? Because, there are different organizations that have, religious people learn with secular Jews. All kinds of different topics, different subjects. And a person would say, well, what do I really know? How can I really give this over to someone else? So someone who, who went to yeshiva, and they learned, or they went to a girls' school and they learned, whether they work or whatever the case is, they have a lot more knowledge at their fingertips than they think. They say, if someone asks me a question I can't answer, okay. No one's saying you're the world's greatest Torah scholar. Might have to go to someone else, get an answer. That's being honest. At the same time, what does the person have to realize? Person has to realize they have a heck of a lot more knowledge than they think. So therefore, a person may say, no, I don't want to do it. They might ask me something I don't know. How much knowledge do I really have? You have a lot more knowledge than a person thinks, right? Obviously, if they grew up religious, they certainly have a lot more knowledge at their disposal. They might not be able to give it over the best, whatever, but they certainly have a certain level of knowledge. Now, if a person does teach others, and they have that ability, then their own understanding becomes greater, right? It becomes greatly enhanced when they give over to others. Why? Because the person's going to have, we mentioned before, person's going to have to understand it very well, i.e. that material, so they're able to give it over to others. If they have doubts or they're confused, they won't be able to do it. That will be an impossibility. Total impossibility. Right? Therefore, when they do teach others, they have to have clarity. Right? A person cannot give over information if they don't have clarity. That for sure not. That for sure not. Because we mentioned the story before. Someone goes to listen to someone. That person himself doesn't have clarity in what they're teaching. So of course, that person's going to come out even more confused. Right? If you don't have clarity, how can you teach? Not only that, what does the Talmud tell me? Talmud tells me somebody learns more from someone that they taught. Right? Someone that they taught than from their own learning. Why? Because students makes the person more sharp, makes their knowledge more sharp. So therefore, giving over to others, if they have the ability, is going to help them as well. First of all, it's going to help them master that material. Because again, person doesn't have that clarity, won't be able to do it. Right? Now, anybody can give this over if they have that ability. Someone here mentions giving over to, share with friends, family, right? If they want to listen, right? Very true. Someone older, give over to someone who's younger. No question. Right? But again, they have that ability. They definitely have that ability. The question is, they have to have that understanding. Right? If they don't have that understanding, what's going to happen? It'll be more confusing. So here, it's interesting. It says you study much Torah, don't take credit for yourself. That's what you're created to do. Very good. Okay, let's say you have knowledge. So you're not taking credit for yourself because that's what you're created to do. But now there's $1.5 million question. The $1.5 million question is, what do I do with the knowledge? Now, some people would say, and I don't necessarily agree with this 100%, but some people would say, even if you've only been learning a little bit, go teach others. Go teach others. Because whatever you know, teach others. Now, what's going to happen? Coffman's convinced they'll start asking you questions you won't have what to answer. Now, you can say, okay, very good question, let me get you an answer. Okay. Now, I'm not saying you have to be a world-class Torah scholar over here. But, when someone, has only been learning for a couple of weeks, they're not giving over knowledge to others. They shouldn't be. They definitely shouldn't be. Other people disagree. Right? But I don't think someone learning for a week or 2 weeks should be giving over to others. You just shouldn't be. You got to concentrate on what you need to learn. You want to do that later? Fine. Over a certain amount of time. Rabbi Uri Zohar should be well. Right? A famous actor, Israeli actor, became religious. All his friends around him, weren't or whatever. Get out of movies. And he sat and learned. They didn't let him go out and do outreach until he had a certain level of knowledge. He hid somewhere for a long time. He didn't give over that knowledge. That basic knowledge. Because he was told not to do that. Because when you go out too quick, and this may be a knock on Chabad, this may be a knock on Eshet Torah. I think they do a lot of good work, but I think they stunt the growth of a lot of people also. Now, Chabad's all over the world. They have Chabad houses all over the world. Now, they take people relatively young age, they send them wherever. Now, I'm not saying they don't learn afterwards. I'm not saying that that's all the learning they ever do, but I think they're stunting their growth. If they have the ability to be able to sit and learn for X number of years. Somebody becomes religious in Eshet Torah, fine. They learn for a certain amount of years. Give them rabbinic, rabbinic ordination, they send them out. And this is one of the things my Rebbe, warned me against. Because I wanted to do this when I was in my late 20s. I had 2 little kids, wanted to go start my own community, blah, blah, blah. And he basically said, I'm an old man, take my advice. If you got money to sit and learn, sit and learn. I don't want you to be like someone who's going to go out, not going to have, you have a certain amount of knowledge, but you won't have the knowledge you need. He said, I give you the blessing when you want to go out, that you go out like fire, but have the knowledge. Go through most of Shas, go through most of the Talmud, most of the rabbinic authorities, this, that. Go through a lot before you do it. Now, he didn't tell me, I'd have a resume yay long and it'd be hard to find a job after the fact. Okay. Other people probably could have told me that, but okay. I wasn't given that information. But 100% he was right. Because years later, I had a tremendous amount of knowledge under my belt. Still had a lot to learn, but I learned a lot. I learned a lot over here. So learning a lot is a whole different world. It's a whole different world. Someone told me recently, they just got rabbinic ordination. They're now a rabbi of a synagogue somewhere. And they're dealing with a few converts, or people in the process of conversion. And basically, they don't really know what they're doing. So they asked me, certain things or whatever. And there was one person, this person's very deep spiritually. And they asked me, they said they're very into, meditation, and deeper things and whatever. And one of the things they told me was that they read Derech Hashem. Is that a good thing? Is that a good thing or not? So I told them, I've given a class on it a couple times, And, even to non-Jews. And people think, I'm nuts for even telling non-Jews to read it. And the reality is, we mentioned before, it gives the purpose of man, purpose of life, why God created the world, reincarnation, evil inclination, many things, right? Many basic things I think Jews and non-Jews have to know. So, as I told this person, I said, I got a great idea. I think you should take the book Derech Hashem and read it and actually learn it, right? Forget about the Kabbalah aspects. Just go through it. Get some of the ideas. It is a deep book. It is a very deep book. Fine, right? But, it's a good book to go through. Now, when it comes to rabbinic ordination, is that on the curriculum? No. The Path of the Just on the curriculum? No. They should have already, Path of the Just, other basic works on ethics, they should have done already. How much of the Talmud is this person going to get through? Not very much. Maybe he'll pass, a test on the laws of Shabbos. Does that mean he went to the whole tractate? No. Or the laws of Kashrus, he went to the whole tractate of Chulin? No. Right? So you're going to say, well, you only need these parts in order to, get out the halachic aspects and learn it, whatever. Fine. But it's a whole different world. That's one of the things. That's one of the main reasons I left the modern Orthodox world, because I was terrified. If I would have gone for rabbinic ordination, I would have passed all the exams. People think they know more than they know. Right? And that's the scary part. And that I'm going to speak quite a bit about tomorrow. I speak for Noahide Nations. Right? That's the very scary part. If you understand what rabbinic ordination really is. Regardless of that, a person has to know that what do we base the fact that how do we know if someone's a great rabbi or not? Now, they're great speakers, doesn't mean they're great rabbis. Right? They're two different things. You can have great orators that don't know anything about Torah. You can have great speakers who they quote Moreno Rabbeinu, Dennis the Menace, and they quote Dennis the Menace in a drasha, in a sermon. Okay. I would have quoted Wizard of Oz. I would have quoted Doonesbury. I might have even quoted Calvin and Hobbes. I was a big fan of Calvin and Hobbes growing up. Right? Okay, that doesn't mean you know a lot of Torah. That just means you know how to make a sermon. You know how to, maybe got a few good stories to tell. I don't know, whatever it is. In the ultra-Orthodox world, or in the Orthodox world in general, it's not about how well you speak and what you do. That's not what it is. It's what a person's measured by. A person's measured by what they know and how they act. But knowledge over here is power. Now, a person can know a tremendous amount to be disgusting in God's eyes at the same time. Where everyone's told me a story, somebody, he knew it when he mentioned the name. He was so disgusted. This person, he said, knew the Babylonian Talmud, Jerusalem Talmud, verbatim. But he said the person was so disgusting and a heretic, he said couldn't even mention his name. Wouldn't even mention his name. So a person could have encyclopedic knowledge and be a pig, same time. Be an absolute pig. He said, how can that be? Look how they act. One of my personal pet peeves, and it's something I'll just never understand, and I'll never get it, right? And that is personal hygiene. Now, you're going to say, why are you even going to mention this? I mentioned it before. But something happened today. I went to synagogue this morning. There's a guy there coughing away, hacking away, right? I'll say that for the most part, covered his mouth, at least when he coughed, right? At least that's obviously worth something, right? But, it was pretty warm. Wasn't freezing in the synagogue, because sometimes they can have the air conditioner on very, very strong. Right, and it wasn't freezing, because the weather today was 29, right, 29 Celsius, about 86 degrees, so it was relatively warm, right? But again, it wasn't. I'm not gonna say it was like unbelievably warm, because they did have the air on, Definitely did have the aroma. I wouldn't say it was so strong. Anyway, this guy is hacking away, coughing left and right, this, that, sneezing, who knows what. Walks out, comes back in with a jacket. He walks in with a jacket. Now, he was already wearing, a suit, and a tie. Now, obviously, the person was cold, right? Now, I do know some people who, if you sit underneath the air conditioner, even when it's like, 35 Celsius or like 95 degrees, right? You're sitting under the AC, it's cold, right? A person can be cold. I know people like sit and learn, in the summer, these places are freezing, so they put on a sweater. I get it. It wasn't that cold, right? I don't know when we get so cold, but it wasn't that cold. Now, this person put on a jacket. He put on a heavy coat. What does a heavy coat symbolize? He's cold. Now, if it's comfortable in this synagogue, it's not too hot, it's not too cold. Just right. As Goldilocks would say. It's just right. So since it was just right, what's he wearing a coat for? Because he got the chills, obviously. Guy's cold. Why would he be cold? Because he's sick. And he's not feeling well. Well, it's obvious. Yeah, he's hacking away. It doesn't look like he's feeling great. Doesn't necessarily mean he's got a fever. I wouldn't go that far. I didn't ask him. But when someone walks in with a heavy coat, and it's really not that cold outside, outside in general, and throw it inside with the AC on, what does that mean? It means the person's sick. The person's not feeling well. If they're not feeling well, what are they doing in synagogue? I got an obligation, to pray, but you're sick. And potentially you're hacking away can make other people sick. Who knows what the person has? Maybe he's got a cold. Maybe he's got COVID. Who knows what he has? But that was a dead giveaway. Walking in with a heavy coat. You don't need a heavy coat. No one else had a heavy coat on. It wasn't that cold. So I deduce the person must be sick. Right? He must have a fever. If you got a fever, you can get the chills. So what was the person doing in synagogue? Good question. You're exempt at that point. You don't have to be in synagogue. But again, hygiene, is a very big personal pet peeve of mine. And, okay, person's going to cough, at least cover your mouth. That's obvious. I would think it's obvious. But, I see it by a lot of different people. It's not obvious. I'm not going to change the world. I'm not perfect myself in many ways. Okay. But at the same time, I would definitely think if someone's sick or someone's coughing, either if you're sick, don't come to synagogue. And if you're coughing, cover your mouth. Cover your mouth for goodness sakes. Why don't, maybe a person just got allergies. Okay. Look at the person that's out. He's got allergies. Fine. Not going to get anyone sick. He's got allergies. But if a person's got a cold or whatever, don't you think? You don't want anyone else to get sick? I would think. Right? Dead giveaway, you put on a coat that is not cold. Why does the person put on a lot of layers when they're sick and they go underneath the covers, turn up the heat because they got a fever. They got a fever, they're sick. So why are you outside among people? I don't care what you tell me what your obligation is to pray, rabbinical, Torah, Torah obligation, rabbinical, it doesn't matter. What about Shomer Nafshe Seichem? What about guarding your body? What about guarding someone else? Make sure someone else doesn't get sick. Now, whatever a person wants to say about wearing masks, we're not going to go there, right? But isn't it true you're protecting someone else, potentially, as well as yourself? People are, masks don't do anything and this and that. So yeah, last year there was no flu. Year before last, not this year. Gee, if people wearing masks, maybe that's a cause. You're going to say, people weren't outside a lot, people this, people that. All kinds of other excuses. So we had nothing to do with wearing masks. So why wasn't there a flu? Someone told me, it's a conspiracy theory, this and that. Without getting into all that, there's a basic hygiene a person should have. Basic hygiene. Person doesn't feel well, don't go to synagogue. You shouldn't be out and about. It's only if you have a fever. And there are people also, just throw this out there, they get COVID, you got to be in isolation, right? You can't go anywhere. At least you have to wait here in Israel. You got to wait 5 days, I think. Then you get a positive test and you're free to go. Right? I think it's 5 days. I think now it's 5 days. Could be other places. Whatever it is, there are people that break that also. Got to go to work. Got to do this. Got to do that. So they go out. But you have the ability to affect others. So if you have the ability to affect others, why in the world are you going against what the protocol is? I don't believe in it. I don't believe, and even if someone's going to get it, they're not going to get it so bad and blah, blah, blah. No one wants to play Russian roulette. Right? If a person has to be in isolation, to be in isolation. That's what you got to do. It's a lot less than it used to be, okay? Cause a lot of problems, okay? But who are you protecting against? You're protecting yourself, but you're protecting others. That's who you're protecting. You're totally protecting others. And that's the whole point. Now, why do people not give this any, they're not going to give this any credibility or anything else? Because they don't care. Bottom line is they don't care about other people. That's the bottom line. Say, no, it's not so bad. It's not this or whatever. No one's wearing masks anyway. If a person gets into the protocol, wherever you live, a certain protocol. No matter you believe in it, you don't believe in it, that's the protocol. Who are you protecting? You're protecting yourself, you're protecting others. Right? You don't want other people to get infected. Even if you think, the number's going way down, a lot of people got the shot anyway, blah, blah. Again, there's a protocol. Wherever you live, that's what you do. We're not saying it's going against Jewish law over here. There's nothing forbidden over here. Totally nothing forbidden here. So why don't people listen? Again, I don't have a good answer. I don't even have a bad answer. I just think people want to do what they want to do. They don't want to be inconvenienced. Or they don't really believe it's as bad as they think. Right? Whatever it is, it's wrong. And you got to protect yourself. You got to protect others. And the people you're protecting more are others more than yourself. So again, it comes to personal hygiene and people aren't stringent on it. I can't give an answer why. I think people are stupid or they've never been educated in it, which could be both. Could very well be both. Right? Now, even if a person's never been educated in it, a person always can learn. I don't know, I should make a campaign. I just don't think it's going to change anything. I definitely don't think it's going to change anything. The reality is people do what they want to do. It affects someone, doesn't affect someone. It's in the Western world, we get caught up with external. I would very readily agree. Most external things we get caught up on, are, hogwash. We shouldn't worry about it. Not at all. At the same time, there are things I think are important. A person goes outside, they should look put together. Someone's a rabbinic scholar or knows something represents Orthodox Judaism. They shouldn't be dressed like a slob. Someone who's a rabbinic scholar, they got a stain on their shirt, can't go outside, liable for death penalty. You're liable for death penalty. Because you represent what the Torah says. How can you go outside looking like a slob? You represent God. Who gives you a right to look like a slob? Not only that, who gives you the right to sneeze in someone's face or cough in their face? I mean, again, what the path of the just says, the Ramchal says, I'm not saying anything new over here. This isn't Torah novella over here. This is obvious. But again, if it's warm out and someone, comes in the synagogue and they're wearing an overcoat, like it's 3 Celsius or below, when it's really, 25 or, it's like 75, that means they're not feeling well. That's what it means. They shouldn't be in synagogue if they don't feel well. Because someone who's wearing an overcoat has a fever. That's, I think, pretty obvious. Because unless this person was absolutely freezing from the air conditioning, it couldn't have been that. Because even the air conditioning blowing on it wasn't that strong. Because it wasn't so hot. Wasn't so hot today. I mean, even though I think the temperature was 29. I think that's what it was. Let me check here. Yeah, 86 degrees Fahrenheit, 29. At the height was 29. Fine. But at the same time, it wasn't 15 in the synagogue. That I can tell you. I don't necessarily like air conditioning blowing on me, but I don't necessarily get so cold, but it definitely wasn't that cold. Somebody like that should have been in a synagogue, not to mention that. They're coughing and hacking. I'll say most of the time they covered their mouth, okay? Hygiene is a basic thing. And I guarantee if this guy was on a bus or he's on a train here in Israel and he's hacking away, I guarantee secular Jews are going to sit there and look and say, what? You disgrace. You bum. All you do is sit and learn all day. You don't do anything. And here you are coughing on everyone, getting everyone sick. No, I'm not saying they have a right to say he's a bum. He's not doing whatever. But they're going to look down upon the person because he doesn't have proper hygiene. You're going to say, is that the person's fault? Yeah. 100% the person's fault. You can't be out there representing Torah and look like a slob. You got to be put together. You're going to say, but the responsibility to represent Torah. You're right. 100% the responsibility. And the Torah is going to put that Jewish person on a higher pedestal. Meaning, the more we keep, the more we do, we're out there. And people are going to say, come on. You're at a higher level. You know better. You should know better. We should. Don't say, I put myself on a higher pedestal. Who says you should do that? Don't ever say that to a secular Jew. Who told you to put religious Jews on a higher pedestal? Someone who stole from somebody or misrepresented what they were doing. Right? So something like that, can't say that. That makes you look worse. So we're out there. And again, if someone looks at us and you do something wrong, when according to the Torah it's wrong. So you have greater responsibility. If they say, you should have done this, should have done that, you didn't do anything wrong, different issue. It's not your problem. But what we have to do in public is we have to be absolutely squeaky clean. We have to be squeaky clean. We cannot give them any answer at whatsoever for them to hack on us. Can't do that. We don't want to give them an opportunity to say anything. Anything. Right now, if they say something, this person's hacking away, and they say, come on, cover your mouth, whatever, they say something. And what are they going to think? They're going to think all Orthodox Jews have no idea what hygiene is. Now, they're going to make a statement, racist, okay? It's wrong. But guess what? If you represent Torah, even if you wouldn't do it yourself anywhere else, you're outside, people looking at you, you have to be on a higher standard. 100% you have to be on a higher standard. Even if you wouldn't normally do it yourself. You know why? Because you're not going to give them an opportunity. Not an opportunity to say anything. I remember, well, this is by, a modern Orthodox Jew. I remember I was waiting for a bus. This person's waiting to get out of his bus pass or whatever. So I figured, okay, I'll go around him, but I'll go on the bus. Person looks at me and he's like, what, you can't wait 2 minutes to get on the bus? I felt like saying, no, you're fiddling and diddling over here. Why should I wait? I shouldn't go on the bus because you're looking around for your bus pass. But again, maybe I should have waited. So just give the person a couple minutes. Or at least if someone else cut, let them yell at him, not me. So maybe that's a claim, maybe it isn't. But again, this wasn't even a secular Jew. This one was more modern. But I was going to say, oh, look, see, Orthodox Jews have no patience. Well, Israelis don't have patience. In general, you stopped at a traffic light. In order for it to turn green, it turns red, yellow, then green. And even before it turns red, yellow, they're already peeping. Where are you going? There's nowhere to go. The light is red. If it's red, yellow, you still can't go. Because God forbid, someone can still come the other way. Impatience. Right? Patience is not something, what we call savlanut. Does not exist in an Israeli dictionary. Israelis don't have patience. Anyone been to Israel? They see that clear as day. All you have to do is be on be at a bus stop, crowded bus stop, and your bus comes. Forget it. It's a free for all. Manners? No, I want to get on the bus. They trample you. What does it matter? Right. So what happened to common sense? What happened to common sense? Right? People will say, what do you mean? What do you mean common sense? Some people don't have common sense. It's brought down derech eretz kidmul l'Torah. The way of properly, having proper character traits comes before Torah. You can say, well, nothing comes before Torah, but if a person learns Torah, they don't have basic hygiene. They don't have basic manners. What's the Torah warning worth? What's it worth? You say, come on, Rabbi, you're exaggerating. I don't think I'm exaggerating. I'm not saying every Orthodox Jew has bad manners. I'm not saying that. There are plenty that have meticulous manners. Or at least if they sneeze, they say, excuse me, whatever. They look the other way. They don't sneeze in your face or whatever. It's common sense. And again, either people would never train with it. That could be. Maybe it wasn't, high on the list of priorities. Or I think people are just stupid. I just, I don't see anything in between. I don't see how, these are obvious things. Right? And a person cannot, the Gemara says that a person cannot learn Torah under somebody is not to them like an angel. And that doesn't mean they're perfect. Definitely doesn't mean they're perfect. But at the same time, they should have proper character traits. We see that, one of my rabbis once told me, learned under somebody for a little bit that was, an absolute Torah genius. Torah genius. Problem was, this rabbi told me that his character traits were horrendous, horrific. And he said he didn't last more than 2 weeks. Because Torah and character traits go hand in hand. If they don't go hand in hand, there's something missing. Now again, does that mean, we're perfect? No, it doesn't mean we're perfect. But at the same time, a person has to have proper character traits. In general. A person sees, someone calling out other rabbis, obviously, if they're not heretics, they're on the up and up, and they call them out and say, it's my way, the highway, and they blast everyone else, it's a problem. You can say, what about rabbis that blast other rabbis? Okay, if they're heretics, they deserve to be blasted. Mentioned this many times. If they're heretics, nothing to talk about. Blast them as much as you want. Coffman's law is, I don't do it all the time. Do it when it's necessary. Do I think maybe some people overkill? Yeah. I will go on record and say I think it's overkill. But I think people have to be warned. I don't think there's any question about it. People have to be warned who not to listen to. Who they should listen to or whatever. Doesn't mean every word of every lecture has to be that. No. Doesn't have to be that. Not at all. Right? People should be warned. Right? But again, people who learn and people who, let's say better, people who teach or people who are out there as Orthodox Jews, no matter what they do, whether they're teaching, whether they work or whatever the case is, they have to be an example. They have to be an example. And if they're not going to be an example, the problem. Because then people are going to say, see, Orthodox Jews this, Orthodox Jews that. Now, it may not be true. You can't label everybody together. That's being a little bit racist. But at the same time, someone acts like a pig. Someone's not dressed properly, let's say. Or my language is dressed like an absolute slob. That's a problem. Now, people are going to make fun of the way a person dresses and they're dressed the way they should be. That's not a problem. That's the other person's problem, not your problem. But see, if a person's not dressed properly, i.e., they're unkempt, different issue. It's a different issue. Doesn't mean a person has to have a new suit, everything. No. Doesn't mean that. You got to look presentable. You absolutely have to look presentable. And looking presentable, okay. People got to look and say, I'll get dressed like that. I'll get it, You represent Torah over here. Even a person not a rabbi, they work. They work in a business. They work in a bank. They work wherever. They have to uphold and look what the Torah wants them to do. Otherwise, that could be a desecration of God's name. Very well could be. Not according to the strict definition. But if they say that's the Torah, then you learn bad things from what people do. That makes us look worse. A heck of a lot worse. So we got to be careful. We definitely, again, I'm not saying people are perfect. We're not perfect by any stretch. But I think there are things that are obvious. I think they're obvious. And I think we have to be wary. And people will say, well, being a Jew or a Jew wannabe, whatever the case is, tremendous responsibility. You're right. It's a tremendous responsibility. And at the same time, I have to uphold that. And even if I wouldn't do certain things in the privacy of my own home, you don't want to do it outside. You do not want to give fodder to anybody. To say Orthodox Jews, this, that, and the other thing. Now, you have anti-Semites, Jews or non-Jews. People will say what they want anyway. But see, if you didn't do anything wrong, then okay, then they're racist. Then what they're saying, there's nothing you could have done anyway. Okay? But if you did something, or said something, or acted in a certain way, or look like an absolute slob, they have a right to say something. Or I'm sorry, let's say better. They don't have a right to say something, but you're asking for it. You're asking for it. Not only that, but when we try and outdo the non-Jew, be better than the non-Jew, see how open-minded we are, it's a disgrace. I see people I used to go to yeshiva with, they're walking into churches, doing other things, because they want to be so open-minded. Well, that's not good for Judaism. I see it, I want to cringe. At least I say, thank God I'm not that way. And I didn't go in that path. Thank God for that. But at the same time, we have to be squeaky clean. No matter what we do. All the more so, someone who teaches. Someone who has influence over others. You got to be impeccable. Or at least try. Doesn't mean we're perfect. Again, no one's saying anyone's perfect here. But a rabbinic scholar goes outside with a stain on their tie, on their shirt, something, they definitely could be liable for a death penalty. Now that's pretty severe because of what they represent. Because they represent Torah over here. When you represent Torah, you're held to a different standard. Right? To a very different standard. So we mentioned that a person becomes greatly enhanced when they give Torah over to others because they have to know the material very well. Says my Rebbe's Rebbe, Ramosha Schneider, of blessed memory. He was a famous, one of the students of the Chofetz Chaim. And in his yeshiva, he had a learning time called Avodas HaKodesh. What is Avodas HaKodesh? It means the service of the holy. But what did it mean over here? Older boys would sanctify sometime and learn what younger boys needed help clarifying what they were learning. Now, this is like giving Meiser, right? What does it mean to give Meiser? You give 1/10 of what you make. Goes to charity. Now, yeshiva students don't make money, right? Unless they're married, obviously, right? But if they're younger, they're not making money. They can't give Meiser. They don't have money to give Meiser. Now, so even though they don't work, they can donate some of their time to help others. Why? Because Meiser over here doesn't just mean with money. It means that they tutor, they help others. So Moshe Schneider over here said, right? He said like this, that an older student, he wants to give some of his time, and he wants the Meiser, give some of his time over here, clarify someone's learning, that helped everybody. Right? That helped the person giving over, right? Helped the older boys because they would sanctify some of their time. It would help the younger boys because they needed that. They needed that help. So a couple hours a week, they did that. Now again, a person, in order to give over to others, has to understand what they're learning. They have to understand what they're learning. And by understanding what they're learning, they're going to be able to give it over in a much stronger way. Because if they don't understand what they're learning, they can't help anyone. They can't even help themselves. They themselves would have to get help from others. But if the whole point over here we said is that a person wants to grow in Torah, and the whole purpose is that I know so much Torah, but how can I think I'm so great because that's what I'm created to do, right? The reality is you should be able, not only shouldn't you think that, but you should also teach others. Because the proper way of learning Torah is to give it over, right? So even if you think it's so great, what you know, give it over. Give it over to others, but give it over in a way they can understand. Give it over even if you're younger. Help others. And there are people with different levels of knowledge that they can give to others. I wouldn't say a real beginner first starting to understand things. Yeah, they shouldn't be given over to others. But if a person has a certain level of understanding, that's what they should do. Right? They should give over to others. So here Moshe Schneider's telling them, guys, 16, 17, 18, they may have a lot of knowledge under their belt, but help others. Help others younger than them. And that they would sanctify sometime. They would give Meiser. Meiser doesn't mean with money. necessarily. It can be with time. Right? They give over a certain amount of time. And by giving over a certain amount of time, they help themselves, they help others. That's what they do. That's what the purpose is. But they can only do it if they have that knowledge. But he felt they had that knowledge. And the boys, it helped them tremendously. Gave them tremendous amount of self-esteem. Because here they helped others. They helped others clarify. Right? They helped others clarify what they needed. What they needed to know. So, not only did it help others who were confused in what they were learning, but help the person giving it over. But the person can only give over if they know what they're doing. If they have clarity. If you don't have clarity, again, I've seen this more times than not. You see people that don't have clarity, and you see they give over information, and you look at it and say, what are they talking about? They don't have clarity. So why are they giving things over if they don't have clarity? Oh, they think they have clarity. So we're going to see one day in the next millennium where the Mishnah Pirkei Avos says you got to know your place. You absolutely have to know your place. Okay. You have to know what your place is over here. You have to know when to say, I don't know. As it said in the name of the Brisker Rav, Rav Yisrael says, soul of age of blessed memory, better to say I don't know than give a bad answer. That's what the Brisker Rav said. Right, my Rebbe once said, asked him a certain thing, and he said he didn't know, wasn't sure, he was stringent, this, that. I asked him a second time, same answer. Third time, he told me what the Brisker Rav said. And then he said, say my name. Say my name. Moshe Sternbuch says, I don't know. And he said, better to say, I don't know, than give a bad answer. So 2 minutes later, I looked over and he said, I don't know. Don't ask. But better say, I don't know, than give a bad answer. One of the things he tried to train me in is that, someone asks a question, if it's a little bit complex, think before you answer. Don't just answer. If you know the answer straight away, it's one thing. It's clear cut. If not, don't answer. Don't answer till you know. Because you want to have clarity. You'd rather say, I'm not sure, let me think about it. Let me look into it. And then afterward, I'll give you an answer. Now, if you have an answer, good. If you don't, you got to go ask somebody. You got to get clarity. But a person should never give an answer if they're not sure. That's for sure. Now again, a person has a certain level of knowledge, I would agree. They want to give over to others. They can't. Right? Someone here said, we mentioned before, that you can help or share with family, friends, or younger students. You're right, if they want to listen. If they want to listen, good. If they don't want to listen, it's their choice. Definitely their choice. Right? But if someone can't give charity, they can help others in different ways. They can comfort people. They can speak to people. Right? They can do acts of loving kindness. Right? If a person doesn't have money to give, okay, you do other things. You're totally stuck. So you see over here, right? You have students that weren't making money. They can't give Meiser. They can't give a tenth, but they can give a certain amount of time to help younger people. To help younger guys. And that helped everybody. Help the younger guys, help them. Tremendously. Right? And that would help. Well, how did it help them? It helped clarify what they knew. Help clarify what they were learning. Because again, giving over something where you're not clear, you won't be able to do. It's not something you'll be able to do. So what do we see over here? We see a totally different thing. See a totally different thing in this Mishnah. Right? According to this, if you studied much Torah, don't take credit for yourself, because that's what you're created to do. So here we're saying it's not just about saying, I'm not going to take credit for myself, right? Or a person who's going to take credit for themselves. Give it over to others. It doesn't mean just keep the Torah to yourself. Because if you have the ability, you should give it over. And not just keep it to yourself. Now, there are some people They don't have the ability to give over to others. Okay? So they don't have the ability to give over. They shouldn't. That's a different issue. You're going to say, does everyone have the ability to give over? No. Not everyone has that ability. So if they don't have the ability, okay, it's a different issue. But if a person has the ability, at some point they should give over to others. Right? But again, a person does not want to stunt their spiritual growth by just giving over to others and not learning for themselves. Right? And that's the most important thing in doing outreach. And that is a person has to learn, wherever they are, they have to have a certain amount of time to learn for themselves. Because giving over classes to others, they have a certain level of knowledge, not that hard. Right? It shouldn't be that hard. But in order for a person to stay fresh, you have to have your own learning also. Because there's certain things the person, if they've learned enough, they can probably give certain things over in their sleep. They don't have to think too much about it. Okay, yeah, this story, that, this, whatever. Right? It's not going to take that much to do. But at the same time, a person has to have their own learning, in what they're doing. They have to have their own spiritual growth. Because if you don't have your own spiritual growth, what's going to happen? You atrophy. You get burnt out. Could get burnt out anyway, but if a person's into their own learning, you won't get burnt out. At least you won't get burnt out as quick. Right? Why? Because again, you have your own learning. You have your other things that you're doing. So you're not just, giving over to others and giving over these classes you could give in your sleep. Right? You're doing something for yourself that's beyond that. Because you yourself have to be growing. So I remember when I was living in New Jersey, I came back to learn, here in Israel. So people said, oh, so you worked? Oh, so like what'd you accomplish? What did you learn? So I had, set time I learned when I was there. Before I did whatever I was doing. So, I learned from, let's say, 2-3 hours a day, at least. In the morning. People knew before 11:30 in the morning, no matter what, they couldn't get a hold of me. And I was done, I was gone. And, they couldn't get a hold of me. So, they said, oh, so what could you accomplish? So I said, I finished this tractate, that tractate. I was in the middle of another tractate when I came back. I wasn't sleeping over here. Right? Even a person's working, you got to find time. You got to make your time. As we said before, you can't rest on your laurels. But also, if you don't have money to donate, help others in other ways. Charity is not just with money. Right? Charity can also be in other ways. So here, we see that a person has the ability to teach others. Very good. Right? So if they can help others, in that sense, very good. Volunteer, whatever. A number of organizations like that to volunteer an hour a week. Or half an hour a week. Something like that. Everyone has what to give. Now, they might not think they're the best at giving it over. Again, some people better, some people not. But at the same time, persons that have money to give, they can give this way. Or they can do things in other ways. Right? Other acts of loving kindness. And that's the same as Meiser. Now, if you have money, you get money, you should keep track of what you owe. And then you should give later. Right? You don't have to put yourself more in the red in order to give charity. That you don't have to do. Right? But if you can't give, you help in other ways. And you should mark down what you have to do. Right? What you have to give later. So this is a novelty here. This is something we wouldn't have learned according to simple explanation of the Mishnah. Right? It's not just don't take credit for yourself, what you've done, because that's what you created to do. But here it goes further. That even a person learns a lot of Torah, give it over to others. That's what you got to do. Right? That's your obligation. Right? Not as simple as we would have thought over here. Definitely not as simple. Right? So you can't take things for granted. We mentioned that earlier. You have to know over here what a person's able to do. But for sure, you can't take credit. You can't take credit for what you've done. Because that's what you created to do. But now I got a different aspect. What's the different aspect over here? Different aspect is give it over. Not just keep it for yourself. Not just say, I'm God's gift to the world. Look how much I learned. Forget about that. That's what you created to do. Giving it over, it's a different issue. Giving it over, a totally different issue. Right? But you have to have the ability. Not everybody has the ability. And we see, even if a person doesn't have money to give to help others, give of yourself. You can donate time. And it helps another way. Because person gives of themselves, they feel good about themselves. It helps them, gives them self-esteem. They're able to help others knowing they're getting nothing in return. Right, essentially. But here's different, because if a person gives over, you're getting something in return. It means your knowledge has to be crystal clear. You can help someone clarify something where you know it's clear to you. That's a whole different thing. Right? That's a whole different thing over here. So that's a different level of knowledge. Right? That's a novelty. That's not something we would have known. Totally not something I would have known. Because if the Mishnah over here tells me, this is what you're created to do, why do you think you're so great? Right? Very interesting to say that it's not just about learning Torah. Learning Torah is a big part of it. It's about giving over Torah. It's like we said by the Shema, Lishmor Lilmo Lamed, Lishmor V'la'asos. Lilmo to learn, Lamed to teach, Lishmor to guard, La'asos to do. Now, does everyone have the ability to give over? No. And if a person doesn't have that ability, God didn't give him that ability, and he never should have that ability, different issue. Totally different issue. God's not going to have a claim against them. Not at all. They didn't have the ability. They weren't given that ability. But if they had the ability and they didn't, okay. That's, the Talmud says, the person's going to be taken to task for. Because they had the ability to do things and they didn't. That's what's going to be held against them. That for sure is going to be held against them. But if a person doesn't have that ability, different issue. Or, let's say better, if they didn't have that ability and they think they did, that's a different issue. Then they're liable that way also. Totally liable that way also. Because they should have realized they didn't have the knowledge. They should have realized they should not be doing what they're doing. They're giving over what they shouldn't be giving over. Because they're not at the level. That God's gonna punish them even more severe. Right? So you see people out there, trying to give over things in Torah that they're not qualified to do, period. Not even going to go into it. No, they're not qualified. They're not qualified. They make a mockery of the Torah. They turn the Torah Coffman's language into a pretzel. That you can't do. That's forbidden to do. That's the liability for someone who does such a thing. The punishment is very severe. Very, very severe. Now, they can make fun, they can scoff, they can say, no, we really have the knowledge, we have this, we have that, we have the other thing. No matter what they say. If they don't have the knowledge and they're out there doing things they shouldn't be doing, forget it. God's going to take care of them in a nasty way. Doesn't need me to say that. He's going to take care of them in a nasty way. Right? So again, this knowledge of knowing what I'm created to do, right? We see a little in a different way. That a person, if they have the ability to teach, they should. If they don't, okay. They're not going to be liable. If they give over something they shouldn't give over, then they're going to be liable in a major way. Right? But we can give to others even without giving over. We can give doing chesed, doing other things. But if we have the ability to give, it helps us, it helps other people as well. So I'm going to stop there. That is chapter 2, Mishnah 9, part 5. So that pretty much ends Mishnah 9, and I think it's a good place to stop because, next week we'll hit Mishnah 10, which is pretty short, and then start Mishnah 11. But we're going to start next week, all being well, start a half an hour later. So instead of 2 o'clock Eastern time, be 2:30 Eastern time, 9:30 Israel time, only because Shabbos is here, it's getting later, going out later, so give me a little bit more time. But so we'll do it about a half an hour later. So we'll just make a note of that for next week.
Wow, respectfully so. Okay, Rabbi. So thank you so much. That was beautiful. I mean, I know that, especially for B'nai Noach, I mean, I think what you brought out today really teaches the principle that, should people be teaching, and why should they be sharing, and consider the repercussions, and who you're to be an example for. I think you brought out some beautiful key points that I think are effective for everybody, even though, would you strictly say that doesn't apply to B'nai Noach? I mean, what you were sharing today?
No, I think it does. I mean, when you're talking about learning and the level of learning, it's a different, it's definitely a different issue. But one of the things we're doing with Noahide Nations is the fact that trying to teach other Noahides what the Noahide laws are for them to give over to others, right? But even for them, the knowledge that they have, I don't think is any different. Even if they have a lot of knowledge, Noahides can have plenty of knowledge, right? Doesn't mean they should think they're so great as well. But again, novelty over here would be that, if they give over to others and they have the ability to, tremendous. It's going to make them much wiser, right? There's no question. Do they have an obligation to give 1/10 of their time to teach others? No, they don't have that obligation. Giving Misa, they certainly should give something to charity, but it doesn't necessarily mean, they have to give, 10%. But I think it applies just the same, that if they've studied a lot of Torah, they could have a lot of Torah. And it doesn't mean they should think they're so great, because they have, because, as an non-Jew, they have a lot less to learn. So let's say they mastered everything they have to know. So what does that mean? It's only a drop in the bucket. It's a very small drop in the bucket compared to what we have to do, right? In general. So yeah, something to, something to keep in mind.
Wow.
But I would definitely say in certain ways that definitely does apply. It definitely does apply to to non-Jews also.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, there you have it, folks. That's chapter 2, Mishnah 9. Thank you so much, Rabbi, for
it. Only took 5. Only took 5 weeks, but that's only part 5.
Well, I mean, after 21 or 20 something parts
next week.
Yeah. Excellent. So next week we're on for Mishnah 10. Excellent. But we will be a half hour later, and
right.
We'll respect that for sure. We're so thankful that you take the time to do these classes, and I'll let you know if I'm on. I might be on with Rabbi Poston again next week too, so that might really shorten the length of the class. But we do appreciate you doing it. So we're going to sign out for now. Wish you all a wonderful week. We'll be back next week, half hour later than usual, and keep an eye out for the posts, and we'll make sure that it goes off without a hitch. So we wish you all a wonderful week. Bye for now.